Picture this: a quiet road, a heartless act, and an unexpected hero. Keanu Reeves, known for his on-screen heroics, found himself in a real-life drama that would touch the hearts of millions. As he drove down a deserted street, he witnessed a shocking scene: a helpless dog being callously tossed from a moving car. In that moment, the line between actor and activist blurred, and Keanu's compassionate nature took center stage. What followed was a week-long journey of healing, not just for the injured pup, but for Keanu's soul as well. As he nursed the dog back to health, a bond formed that would drive him to seek justice in the most unexpected way. This tale of canine rescue and human redemption will leave you wondering, how far would you go to right or wrong? Join us as we unravel this emotional story of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable spirit of both man and his four-legged friend. Before we continue the story, grab your popcorn and get comfy. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. We have another amazing story lined up for you tomorrow. On a crisp autumn morning, Keanu Reeves stepped out of his modest Los Angeles home, ready for what he thought would be just another day. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the quiet streets. Keanu, known for his down-to-earth nature, decided to take a leisurely walk before heading to his latest film set. Little did he know that this simple decision would set in motion a series of events that would change his life and the life of another soul forever. As he strolled down the tree-lined avenue, Keanu's mind wandered to his upcoming scenes. He was deep in thought, mentally rehearsing his lines and considering the emotional depth he wanted to bring to his character. The gentle rustle of leaves beneath his feet and the distant chirping of birds provided a soothing backdrop to his contemplations. Keanu had always been an early riser, finding solace in the tranquility of dawn. This morning ritual allowed him to center himself before diving into the chaotic world of Hollywood. He breathed in the crisp air, feeling grateful for these moments of peace. His path took him through a local park, where he often found inspiration for his roles and a connection to the simpler things in life. As he walked, Keanu reflected on his journey as an actor and the impact he hoped to make through his work. He believed in the power of storytelling to touch hearts and change perspectives. Little did he know that today, he would become part of a real-life story more compelling than any script he had ever read. The neighborhood was just beginning to wake up. A few joggers nodded respectfully as they passed, recognizing the actor but allowing him his privacy. Keanu appreciated this about his community, the ability to blend in and be treated like any other resident. It was this normalcy that he cherished, a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour of Hollywood premieres and red carpets. As he rounded a corner, Keanu's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car engine revving aggressively. The peaceful morning air was suddenly shattered by the harsh noise, causing him to look up from his reverie. What he saw next would forever be etched in his memory, transforming his ordinary day into something extraordinary. The serenity of the morning was abruptly shattered as Keanu's eyes locked onto a scene that seemed almost surreal in its cruelty. A sleek, black car had screeched to a halt at the side of the road, its engine still running aggressively. The passenger door flew open with such force that it seemed ready to tear off its hinges. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds, but for Keanu, it felt like an eternity. A man, his face contorted with rage, emerged from the vehicle. In his arms was a small, struggling bundle, a dog, whimpering and clearly terrified. Without a moment's hesitation, the man violently threw the helpless animal onto the sidewalk. The sickening thud as the dog hit the concrete echoed in the quiet street, a sound that would haunt Keanu for days to come. Time seemed to stand still as Keanu processed the horrific act he had just witnessed. The man, oblivious to Keanu's presence, spat out a string of obscenities at the trembling creature before slamming the car door shut. The tires screeched as the vehicle sped away, leaving behind a cloud of exhaust and an injured, frightened dog. Keanu stood frozen for a split second, his mind reeling from the shock of what he had just seen. The contrast between the peaceful morning he had been enjoying and this act of senseless cruelty was jarring. It was as if two different worlds had collided, the world of everyday kindness and the world of inexplicable brutality. As the reality of the situation sank in, a surge of emotions washed over Keanu. Anger, disbelief, and a profound sense of injustice battled within him. How could someone be so heartless? What kind of person would harm an innocent animal in such a callous manner? These questions raced through his mind as he struggled to comprehend the cruelty he had just witnessed. But beneath the anger and shock, another emotion began to surface: determination. Keanu had always been known for his compassionate nature, both on and off-screen. He had supported numerous animal welfare causes over the years, believing deeply in the importance of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Now, faced with a real-life situation that demanded immediate action, Keanu felt a sense of purpose crystallize within him. The actor's instincts kicked in, not those honed on movie sets, but the innate human instinct to help a creature in distress. Without a second thought, Keanu rushed towards the injured dog, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and concern. As he approached, he could see the animal trembling, its eyes wide with fear and pain. Keanu's mind raced, trying to recall everything he knew about handling injured animals. He knew he had to be cautious. A frightened and hurt dog might lash out in self-defense. Slowly, he crouched down, making himself appear as non-threatening as possible. He began to speak in soft, soothing tones, hoping to calm the terrified creature. "Hey there, little one," Keanu murmured, his voice gentle and reassuring. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe now." As he inched closer, Keanu could see the extent of the dog's injuries. There were visible scrapes and bruises from the impact with the sidewalk, and the way the dog held its body suggested there might be more severe internal injuries. The sight only strengthened Keanu's resolve to help. Carefully, he extended his hand, allowing the dog to catch his scent. He remained still, patient, knowing that trust would be crucial in this situation. Slowly, ever so slowly, the dog's trembling began to subside. Its eyes, still wary, seemed to hold a glimmer of hope as it gazed up at Keanu. In that moment, as man and dog locked eyes, a connection was formed. It was as if the animal sensed Keanu's genuine desire to help, his inherent kindness shining through. The dog let out a small whimper, not of fear this time, but of relief, as if it knew it had found a friend in this moment of dire need. Keanu's heart swelled with a mix of sadness and determination. He made a silent promise to the injured creature. He would do everything in his power to right this wrong, to ensure that this dog would never suffer such cruelty again. Little did he know that this promise would lead him on a journey of compassion, justice, and unexpected emotional bonds. As Keanu knelt beside the injured dog, he was struck by the depth of emotion in its eyes. Despite the pain and fear it must have been experiencing, there was an undeniable spark of life, a silent plea for help that touched Keanu to his very core. The dog's gaze seemed to convey a complex mix of emotions: fear, yes, but also a glimmer of hope, as if it recognized in Keanu a potential savior. The actor found himself caught in a moment of profound connection with this small, wounded creature. He had always felt a special affinity for animals, but this was different. This wasn't about admiring a pet from afar or supporting animal welfare causes. This was immediate, raw, and deeply personal. The dog's silent plea resonated within him, awakening a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. The dog didn't flinch away. Instead, it seemed to lean slightly towards him, as if drawn by the warmth and kindness in Keanu's voice. This small movement, however, caused the dog to whimper in pain, a sound that cut through Keanu like a knife. He realized that time was of the essence. The dog needed medical attention and fast. Keanu's mind raced, considering his options. He needed to get the dog to a veterinarian, but he was wary of causing more pain by moving it. He also knew that he couldn't leave the animal alone while he went for help. What if the cruel owner came back? Or what if the dog, in its pain and confusion, wandered into the street? As these thoughts tumbled through his mind, Keanu noticed something that made his heart ache even more. Despite its injuries and the trauma it had just endured, the dog was trying to wag its tail. It was a feeble attempt, more of a twitch really, but the meaning was clear. Even in its darkest moment, This brave little creature was trying to be friendly, to connect with the kind human who had come to its aid. This small gesture of trust and resilience strengthened Keanu's resolve. He knew what he had to do. With infinite care, he began to remove his jacket, planning to use it as a makeshift stretcher to carry the dog. As he did so, he continued to talk to the animal, his voice a constant reassuring presence. "You're so brave, little one. I know you're in pain, but I promise I'm going to take care of you. We're going to get through this together." As Keanu prepared to lift the dog, he was struck by how light and fragile it felt. This wasn't a large, robust dog, but a small, vulnerable creature that had been callously discarded like trash. The injustice of it all fueled Keanu's determination. He vowed silently that he would not only help this dog heal, but would also find a way to bring its abuser to justice. Carefully cradling the injured animal in his jacket, Keanu stood up. The dog let out a small whimper but didn't struggle, seeming to understand that Keanu was trying to help. As he held the warm, trembling body close to his chest, Keanu felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him. In that moment, he made a promise, not just to the dog, but to himself. "I've got you now," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you ever again." With these words, Keanu began to walk quickly but carefully towards his home. He knew there was a veterinary clinic nearby, and his mind was already formulating a plan. He would get the dog the medical attention it needed, and then he would figure out the rest. One thing was certain: his ordinary day had turned into an extraordinary mission of compassion and justice. As he walked, Keanu couldn't help but reflect on the strange twists of fate that had brought him to this moment. If he hadn't decided to take that early morning walk, if he hadn't been in exactly the right place at the right time, what would have happened to this innocent creature? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. The weight of the injured dog in his arms felt like a responsibility, but also like a privilege. Keanu had always believed in the importance of kindness and compassion, but now he was living those values in a very real and immediate way. He knew that the road ahead might be challenging, nursing the dog back to health, finding out who was responsible for this cruelty, ensuring justice was served, but he was ready to face those challenges. Its eyes were closed now, but its breathing seemed steady. There was something about its small, battered body that spoke of resilience, of a will to survive despite the cruelty it had faced. Keanu felt a wave of admiration for this brave little soul. "We're almost there," he murmured, as much to reassure himself as the dog. "Just hold on a little longer. Everything's going to be all right." The ordinary day had indeed turned extraordinary, setting in motion a series of events that would challenge him, inspire him, and ultimately remind him of the profound impact that one act of kindness can have in the world. Reaching his vehicle, Keanu faced another dilemma. He needed to open the car door while still holding the dog securely. With some maneuvering, he managed to open the rear door without disturbing his precious cargo. Gently, he lowered the blanket-wrapped dog onto the back seat. He had already decided against putting the animal in the trunk space, wanting to keep a close eye on it during the drive. As he arranged the blanket to create a makeshift nest, Keanu's mind was already racing ahead, planning the next steps. He knew he needed to get the dog to a veterinarian as quickly as possible, but he also wanted to ensure the ride was as smooth and stress-free as possible for the injured animal. With this in mind, he took a moment to clear any loose items from the backseat, creating a safe, stable space for his new charge. Before closing the door, Keanu took one last look at the dog. Its eyes, though clouded with pain, seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. It was as if the animal understood that its fortune had changed, that it was now in caring hands. "We're going to make this right," Keanu promised, his voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be okay." With that, he closed the door gently and moved to the driver's seat. As he started the engine, Keanu's determination solidified. This wasn't just about rescuing a dog. It was about standing up against cruelty and indifference. It was about making a difference, one life at a time. As Keanu eased his car onto the road, he was acutely aware of his precious passenger in the back seat. Every bump, every turn was navigated with extreme care, his usually swift driving style replaced by a cautious approach that prioritized the comfort of the injured dog. His mind raced as he drove, weighing his options. The nearest veterinary clinic was about 15 minutes away, but Keanu knew that in situations like these, every minute counted. He decided to call ahead, wanting to ensure they were prepared for an emergency case. At a red light, Keanu quickly dialed the number of the veterinary clinic. His voice, usually calm and collected, carried an urgency that conveyed the gravity of the situation. "I'm bringing in an injured dog," he explained rapidly to the receptionist. "It's been thrown from a moving vehicle. I'm about 10 minutes out. Please be ready." The receptionist, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, assured him they would be prepared. Keanu's relief was palpable. He knew that prompt medical attention could make all the difference for the dog's recovery. As he continued to drive, Keanu found himself talking to the dog, his voice a soothing presence in the car. He shared stories of his own experiences with animals, of the dogs he had known and loved. It was as much to comfort the injured animal as it was to calm his own nerves. "You know, I had a dog once named Arch," Keanu said softly, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror to check on his passenger. "He was the most loyal companion you could ask for. Always there, always understanding. That's the thing about dogs, you see. They have this incredible capacity for love and forgiveness." The dog in the back seat whimpered softly, as if in response. Keanu's heart clenched at the sound. He wanted nothing more than to take away the animal's pain, to undo the cruelty it had endured. "We're almost there, buddy," he reassured, his voice thick with emotion. "Just hang on a little longer." As they neared the veterinary clinic, Keanu's mind turned to the future. What would happen to this dog after its injuries were treated? He couldn't bear the thought of it ending up in a shelter, or worse, back on the streets. In that moment, without fully realizing it, Keanu made a decision that would change both his life and the life of the injured animal. "You're coming home with me," he said firmly, his eyes meeting the dog's in the rearview mirror. "We're in this together now." Finally, the veterinary clinic came into view. Keanu pulled into the parking lot, relief washing over him as he saw a team already waiting outside. As he carefully lifted the blanket-wrapped dog from the back seat, he felt a surge of protectiveness. This wasn't just a random act of kindness anymore. It was the beginning of a bond, a commitment to see this through to the end. As he carried the dog towards the waiting veterinary team, Keanu's resolve strengthened. He would do whatever it took to nurse this dog back to health, and then he would ensure that justice was served. The person responsible for this act of cruelty would face the consequences of their actions. But for now, his focus was entirely on the trembling bundle in his arms. As he handed the dog over to the capable hands of the veterinarian, Keanu felt a mix of hope and anxiety. The journey to safety was complete, but the road to recovery was just beginning. "You're safe now," Keanu whispered to the dog as it was gently taken from his arms. "I'll be right here waiting for you." As the veterinary team rushed the injured animal inside, Keanu stood in the parking lot, his heart heavy with concern but buoyed by determination. This was more than just a rescue. It was the start of a mission to heal, to protect, and ultimately, to right a terrible wrong. With a deep breath, Keanu followed the team inside. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. For now, all that mattered was the well-being of the brave little dog that had found its way into his care and, unknowingly, into his heart. But he knew that these were the experts who could provide the necessary medical attention. Keanu watched anxiously as they carried the dog into the examination room, his eyes never leaving the swinging doors that separated him from his newfound companion. The next few hours were a blur of activity and tension. Keanu paced the waiting room, his mind racing with questions and concerns. Would the dog survive? How severe were its injuries? What kind of life would it have after this ordeal? The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders, a burden he willingly accepted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lead veterinarian emerged from the examination room. Keanu's heart skipped a beat as he searched the doctor's face for any sign of good news. To his relief, the vet offered a reassuring smile. "The dog is stable," the vet explained, her voice calm and professional. "He suffered some bruising and a few minor fractures, but thankfully, there's no internal bleeding or life-threatening injuries. With proper care and rest, he should make a full recovery. Keanu felt a wave of relief wash over him, his tense muscles finally relaxing. But his respite was short-lived as the vet continued. However, the recovery process will be lengthy and demanding. Are you prepared to take on that responsibility? Without hesitation, Keanu nodded firmly. Absolutely, he replied, his voice filled with determination. I'll do whatever it takes to help this dog heal and find happiness again. The vet smiled, impressed by Keanu's commitment. She then proceeded to outline the immediate care plan for the dog. It included pain management, antibiotics to prevent infection, and careful monitoring of his vital signs. Keanu listened intently, absorbing every detail and asking questions to ensure he understood the gravity of the situation and the care required. As the vet finished explaining the medical procedures, Keanu felt a mix of emotions: relief that the dog would survive, anger at the person who had caused this suffering, and a deep sense of responsibility for the creature's well-being. He knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it head-on. With the immediate medical crisis addressed, Keanu prepared himself for the next phase of the dog's recovery. He gathered the necessary supplies, including medication, special food, and comfort items to create a safe and nurturing environment for his new companion. As he left the clinic with the dog securely nestled in a comfortable carrier, Keanu felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just an actor or a celebrity. He was now a caregiver, protector, and friend to this vulnerable creature. The days that followed were a testament to Keanu's unwavering commitment to the injured dog's recovery. He transformed a corner of his home into a cozy, makeshift recovery room, complete with a soft bed, warm blankets, and easy access to water and food. Keanu's focus shifted entirely to providing round-the-clock care for his new companion. Every morning began with a gentle checkup, where Keanu would carefully examine the dog's injuries, looking for any signs of improvement or complications. He diligently followed the vet's instructions, administering medications at precise intervals and changing bandages with the utmost care. The actor's hands, usually seen wielding prop weapons in action movies, now moved with a tender touch, soothing the dog's pain and offering comfort. Keanu's dedication extended far beyond just physical care. He spent hours sitting beside the dog, talking to him in soft, reassuring tones. He read books aloud, shared stories of his own life, and even played gentle music, believing that the positive energy would aid in the healing process. The dog, initially wary and frightened, began to respond to Keanu's voice, his tail wagging slightly at the sound of approaching footsteps. Feeding time became a ritual of patience and encouragement. Keanu prepared special meals as prescribed by the vet, often hand-feeding the dog when it was too weak to eat on its own. He celebrated every small victory, each morsel of food accepted, each small movement made, as a step towards recovery. Sleep became a luxury for Keanu, as he kept vigilant watch over his charge. Many nights were spent on a makeshift bed next to the dog, ready to offer comfort at the slightest whimper or sign of distress. Dark circles formed under his eyes, but they did nothing to dim the determination that shone within them. As days turned into weeks, Keanu's life revolved entirely around the dog's care. He postponed work commitments, rearranged his schedule, and politely declined social invitations. His friends and colleagues, while surprised at first, soon came to admire his selfless dedication. Some even offered to help, bringing supplies or simply providing moral support during this challenging time. Keanu's journey of caregiving was not without its difficulties. There were moments of frustration when progress seemed slow, and times of fear when the dog's condition momentarily worsened. But through it all, Keanu remained steadfast. He sought advice from veterinarians, researched canine recovery techniques, and even connected with animal rehabilitation experts to ensure he was providing the best possible care. One particularly challenging night, the dog experienced a setback, seeming to be in more pain than usual. Keanu stayed up all night, gently massaging the dog's limbs, speaking words of encouragement, and carefully monitoring his temperature and breathing. As dawn broke, the dog's discomfort eased, and Keanu felt a renewed sense of hope. This experience only strengthened his resolve to see the recovery through to the end. The actor's compassion extended beyond just physical care. Recognizing the emotional trauma the dog had endured, Keanu worked tirelessly to rebuild the animal's trust in humans. He moved slowly around the dog, always speaking in soothing tones, and allowed the dog to initiate contact when it felt comfortable. This patience paid off as the dog gradually began to seek out Keanu's touch, finding comfort in his presence. Keanu's dedication did not go unnoticed by the veterinary staff who regularly checked on the dog's progress. They were impressed by his attention to detail, his willingness to learn, and his unwavering commitment. One vet remarked, "In all my years of practice, I've rarely seen someone so dedicated to an animal's recovery." Keanu's care is making a real difference. As weeks turned into a month, the demanding care routine became second nature to Keanu. He found a new rhythm to his life, one that revolved around the needs of his canine companion. The exhaustion and sacrifices seemed small in comparison to the joy he felt watching the dog grow stronger each day. In caring for this injured creature, Keanu discovered a depth of compassion within himself that he hadn't fully realized before. As the days passed, small but significant signs of improvement began to emerge in the dog's condition. These changes, while subtle at first, were like beacons of hope for Keanu, reinforcing his belief in the power of care and perseverance. The first notable improvement came in the dog's appetite. What started as a struggle to consume even the smallest amounts of food gradually evolved into eager anticipation of meal times. Keanu's heart swelled with joy the first time he saw the dog's tail wag at the sight of his food bowl. This renewed interest in eating was not just a sign of physical recovery, but also indicated a growing will to live and thrive. Mobility was the next hurdle to overcome. In the beginning, the dog could barely move without whimpering in pain. Keanu, under the guidance of the vet, began a gentle physical therapy routine. He started with simple exercises, carefully moving the dog's legs to prevent muscle atrophy. As days turned into weeks, these sessions became more involved. Keanu would encourage the dog to take a few steps, supporting its weight and praising every effort. The breakthrough came on a sunny afternoon, about 3 weeks into the recovery process. Keanu was sitting on the floor, gently coaxing the dog to walk towards him, when suddenly, the animal took several unassisted steps. The moment was electric. Keanu's eyes welled up with tears of joy, and the dog, seeming to sense the significance of the moment, gave a small, triumphant bark. This milestone marked a turning point in the recovery journey. From that day forward, progress seemed to accelerate. The dog began to move around more, exploring its surroundings with growing confidence. Keanu created safe spaces throughout the house, allowing the dog to roam and rebuild its strength naturally. He watched with pride as his furry friend navigated small obstacles, each day venturing a little further than the last. The physical wounds began to heal visibly. Bruises faded, cuts closed, and fur started to grow back over scarred areas. Keanu diligently applied the prescribed ointments and changed bandages, noting with satisfaction how the dog's body was mending itself. The vet's checkups became occasions for celebration as each visit confirmed the steady progress. Perhaps the most heartening aspect of the recovery was the change in the dog's demeanor. The fear and wariness that had initially clouded its eyes began to dissipate, replaced by a growing spark of curiosity and joy. The dog started to respond more enthusiastically to Keanu's voice, even attempting to play at times. These moments of playfulness, though brief at first, were precious indicators of the animal's improving mental state. Sleep patterns improved dramatically as well. Gone were the restless nights filled with whimpers of pain. Instead, the dog began to sleep peacefully, often curled up close to Keanu. This deep, healing sleep was crucial for the recovery process, allowing the dog's body to focus its energy on repair and regeneration. As the recovery progressed, Keanu introduced more elements of a normal dog's life. He brought in soft toys, carefully chosen to be safe for the still healing animal. The first time the dog picked up a toy in its mouth and brought it to Keanu was a moment of pure joy. It was a clear sign that the dog was not just recovering physically but was beginning to embrace life again. Outdoor experiences were gradually reintroduced. Initially, this meant simply sitting in the backyard, allowing the dog to feel the grass under its paws and breathe in the fresh air. As strength returned, these outings extended to short, gentle walks. Keanu was ever vigilant, watching for signs of fatigue or discomfort, always ready to carry the dog home if needed. The dog's senses seemed to reawaken during this period of recovery. Keanu noticed how his companion would perk up at the sound of birds or the scent of flowers. These small reactions to the world around them were powerful reminders of the resilience of life and the dog's growing engagement with its environment. Throughout this journey of recovery, there were setbacks, days when progress seemed to halt or even reverse. During these times, Keanu's patience and positivity were crucial. He learned to celebrate even the smallest victories and to maintain hope during challenging periods. His unwavering belief in the dog's ability to heal seemed to transmit itself to the animal, providing a constant source of encouragement. As weeks turned into months, the transformation became undeniable. The once broken creature that Keanu had rescued from the roadside was evolving into a vibrant, energetic dog. Scars remained, both physical and emotional, but they were overshadowed by the new lease on life that shone through in every wagging tail and playful bark. The vet, on a recent checkup, marveled at the progress. "This recovery is nothing short of miraculous," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "It's a testament to both the dog's resilience and your extraordinary care, Keanu." For Keanu, watching this gradual recovery was a profoundly moving experience. It reinforced his belief in the power of compassion and the incredible strength of the bond between humans and animals. As he looked at the now thriving dog, he felt a sense of accomplishment unlike any he had experienced in his career. This journey of healing had not only transformed the dog, but had also left an indelible mark on Keanu's own heart. As the dog's physical recovery progressed, something equally profound was taking place: the formation of an unbreakable bond between Keanu and his canine companion. This connection, forged through countless hours of care, shared struggles, and small triumphs, grew into a relationship that would change both of their lives forever. The foundation of this bond was laid in those early days of intense care. Keanu's gentle touch, soothing voice, and constant presence became a source of comfort and security for the traumatized dog. As the animal began to associate Keanu with safety and relief from pain, a tentative trust started to form. This trust was the seedling from which their deep connection would grow. As the dog's strength returned, so did its personality. Keanu watched with delight as quirks and traits began to emerge. He discovered that his new friend had a particular fondness for classical music, often tilting its head in curiosity when Keanu played Bach or Mozart. This shared appreciation for music became a special part of their routine, with Keanu often humming tunes as they relaxed together. Communication between them evolved in subtle, yet meaningful ways. Keanu learned to read the dog's body language, understanding when it needed comfort, play, or simply some quiet companionship. In turn, the dog became attuned to Keanu's moods, offering a comforting paw or a playful nudge when it sensed he was stressed or tired. This nonverbal dialogue deepened their connection, creating a mutual understanding that transcended words. Their bond was strengthened through shared experiences and routines. Morning walks, once a careful exercise in rebuilding strength, became joyous explorations. Keanu delighted in watching his companion's growing curiosity about the world. The way it would pause to sniff a flower or playfully chase a butterfly. These simple moments of shared joy cemented their relationship. As the dog's playfulness returned, so did a new dimension to their bond. Keanu found himself laughing more than he had in years, engaged in silly games of tug-of-war or fetch. The pure, uncomplicated happiness that radiated from the dog during these play sessions was infectious, reminding Keanu of the simple pleasures in life. The emotional healing of the dog became intertwined with Keanu's own emotional journey. As he helped his companion overcome fear and trauma, Keanu found himself confronting and healing some of his own emotional scars. The unconditional love and trust the dog offered became a powerful force in Keanu's life, helping him navigate his own challenges with renewed strength and perspective. Their connection deepened through moments of vulnerability. On nights when the dog had nightmares, likely reliving its traumatic experience, Keanu was there to provide comfort and reassurance. Similarly, on days when Keanu felt overwhelmed by the pressures of his career or personal life, The simple act of sitting quietly with his loyal companion brought a sense of peace and grounding. As time passed, it became clear that their bond was not just one of caregiver and patient, but of true companionship. The dog's presence in Keanu's life filled a void he hadn't even realized existed. The unconditional love and loyalty he received were matched only by his own devotion to his furry friend. This deep connection began to influence other aspects of Keanu's life. He found himself making decisions with the dog's well-being in mind, from choosing film projects that wouldn't require long periods away from home to redesigning parts of his house to be more dog-friendly. The needs and happiness of his companion became seamlessly integrated into his life plans. The transformation in both Keanu and the dog was noticed by everyone around them. Friends and colleagues remarked on the newfound lightness in Keanu's demeanor, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about his dog. Veterinarians and animal behaviorists were amazed at the dog's recovery, not just physically but emotionally, attributing much of it to the strong bond it had formed with Keanu. As the months passed, their relationship continued to evolve and deepen. They developed their own language of sorts, a look, a gesture, a particular bark that conveyed volumes between them. Keanu found himself talking to the dog about his day, sharing thoughts and feelings he rarely expressed to anyone else. In those moments, he felt truly heard and understood. The impact of this bond extended beyond their personal relationship. Keanu became more involved in animal welfare causes, using his platform to advocate for rescue animals and responsible pet ownership. His experience had opened his eyes to the profound impact that the human-animal bond can have, and he felt compelled to share this message with the world. In quiet moments, Keanu often reflected on the serendipity of their meeting. What had started as a chance encounter on a roadside had blossomed into one of the most significant relationships of his life. He marveled at how this creature, once broken and discarded, had brought such richness and meaning to his existence. As they sat together on the porch one evening, watching the sunset, with the dog on the mend, Keanu Reeves found himself unable to shake off the lingering sense of injustice. The image of the innocent creature being callously tossed from a moving vehicle haunted him, fueling a determination to right this wrong. Keanu knew that true healing for both the dog and his own conscience would only come through seeking justice for the heinous act. Keanu's first step was to retrace his steps to the scene of the incident. He revisited the stretch of road where he had first encountered the injured dog, hoping to find any clues that might lead him to the perpetrator. As he scanned the area, his keen eye caught sight of something glinting in the afternoon sun, a small piece of metal that appeared to have fallen from a vehicle. Upon closer inspection, Keanu realized it was a custom license plate frame, likely dislodged during the abrupt stop when the dog was thrown out. The frame bore the name of a local auto shop, providing Keanu with his first solid lead. With renewed vigor, he set out to follow this thread, determined to unravel the mystery and bring the culprit to justice. Keanu's next move was to visit the auto shop mentioned on the license plate frame. Approaching the counter, he craftily engaged the mechanic in conversation, weaving a story about how he was looking for a friend who had recently had work done at their shop. He described the vehicle he had glimpsed on that fateful day, careful not to arouse suspicion. The mechanic, unsuspecting and eager to help, checked their records and provided Keanu with a list of recent customers who matched the description. Armed with this information, Keanu felt a surge of hope. He was one step closer to identifying the person responsible for the dog's suffering. As night fell, Keanu found himself poring over the list of names and addresses, cross-referencing them with public records and social media profiles. His celebrity status granted him access to resources that might have been out of reach for the average person, and he leveraged every connection he had to gather more information. Hours turned into days as Keanu pursued every lead, no matter how small. He interviewed neighbors, checked security camera footage from nearby businesses, and even enlisted the help of a private investigator friend to dig deeper into the backgrounds of potential suspects. Throughout this process, Keanu's resolve never wavered. The memory of the dog's pain-filled eyes and whimpers of agony fueled his determination. He knew that somewhere out there, the person responsible for this cruelty was going about their life, unaware that justice was closing in on them. After days of relentless investigation, Keanu's efforts finally bore fruit. He had narrowed down his list of suspects to a single individual, a man named Frank Davenport, whose address matched one on the list provided by the auto shop. Keanu's heart raced as he drove to the address, a modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As he approached, he noticed a vehicle in the driveway that matched the description of the one he had seen on that fateful day. The custom license plate frame from the auto shop was clearly visible, confirming Keanu's suspicions. Parking his car a short distance away, Keanu observed the house, watching for any signs of activity. He needed to be certain that this was indeed the right place before making his move. As he waited, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the moment he found the injured dog to the painstaking investigation that followed. As dusk settled over the neighborhood, Keanu saw a man matching Frank Davenport's description return home. The man's demeanor was casual, showing no signs of the guilt or remorse that should have plagued someone who had committed such a cruel act. This only served to strengthen Keanu's resolve. With the abuser's residence now confirmed, Keanu knew he had to proceed cautiously. He couldn't risk alerting Davenport to his presence or intentions. Keanu decided to conduct further surveillance, observing Davenport's routines and habits to determine the best time to confront him. Over the next few days, Keanu meticulously documented Davenport's comings and goings. He noticed that Davenport lived alone and typically left for work early in the morning, returning in the evening. On weekends, he often spent time in his garage, working on his car, the very vehicle used in the act of cruelty against the dog. As Keanu watched Davenport go about his daily life, seemingly without a care in the world, he felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could someone capable of such callousness towards an innocent animal live so normally? The contrast between Davenport's mundane routines and the pain he had inflicted on the dog only fueled Keanu's determination to bring him to justice. During his surveillance, Keanu also took note of the neighborhood dynamics. He observed the comings and goings of other residents, identified any potential witnesses, and mapped out possible escape routes. This meticulous planning was crucial. Keanu knew that when the time came to confront Davenport, he needed to be prepared for any eventuality. As the days passed, Keanu's resolve only grew stronger. He thought about the dog, now recovering in the safety of his home, and knew that he owed it to the innocent creature to see this through. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders, but Keanu embraced it, drawing strength from the knowledge that he was fighting for a voiceless victim. Finally, after a week of careful observation and planning, Keanu felt ready to make his move. He had identified a window of opportunity, a time when Davenport would be home alone, with minimal risk of interruption or witnesses. With a mix of anticipation and trepidation, Keanu prepared himself for the confrontation that lay ahead. As twilight descended on the quiet suburban street, Keanu Reeves steeled himself for the confrontation he had been preparing for. He parked his car a block away and approached Frank Davenport's house on foot, his heart pounding with a mixture of righteous anger and nervous energy. Keanu knocked on the door, his knuckles rapping against the wood with a determination that belied the turmoil within him. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing Frank Davenport, the man Keanu had spent weeks tracking down. "Can I help you?" Davenport asked, his expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance at the unexpected visitor. Keanu's voice was low and controlled as he responded, "Mr. Davenport, we need to talk about what happened on Highway 101 2 weeks ago." The color drained from Davenport's face, his eyes widening in recognition and fear. He attempted to slam the door shut, but Keanu was prepared, wedging his foot in the doorway and pushing his way into the house. "Who are you?" Davenport stammered, backing away as Keanu advanced into the living room. "I'm the person who found the dog you threw out of your car," Keanu replied, his voice thick with emotion. "The dog that you left to die on the side of the road." Davenport's face contorted into a mix of defiance and panic. "I don't know what you're talking about," he sputtered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his guilt. Keanu's eyes blazed with intensity as he recounted the events of that day, describing in vivid detail the condition of the dog and the suffering it had endured. With each word, Davenport seemed to shrink, the weight of his actions finally catching up to him. "Why?" Keanu demanded, his voice rising. "Why would you do something so cruel to an innocent animal?" Davenport's facade crumbled, and he collapsed onto his couch, burying his face in his hands. I didn't mean to," he choked out. "The dog was sick, and I couldn't afford the vet bills. I panicked. I didn't know what else to do." Keanu felt a surge of disgust and pity wash over him. "There are always other options," he said, his voice softening slightly. "Shelters, rescue organizations, even asking for help online. What you did was not just cruel, it was cowardly." As Davenport sat there, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, Keanu took a moment to look around the room. His eyes fell on a framed photo of a young girl hugging a dog, presumably Davenport's daughter, with the very animal he had discarded so callously. "Is this your daughter?" Keanu asked, picking up the frame. Davenport nodded weakly. "And this was her dog, wasn't it?" Keanu pressed, his voice laden with disappointment and anger. Another nod from Davenport, who couldn't bring himself to meet Keanu's gaze. "What did you tell her?" Keanu asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I told her the dog ran away," Davenport admitted, his voice breaking. "I couldn't bear to tell her the truth." The room fell silent, the weight of Davenport's confession hanging heavily in the air. Keanu took a deep breath, struggling to contain the maelstrom of emotions swirling within him. "Mr. Davenport," Keanu began, his voice steady and resolute, "what you did was inexcusable. That dog trusted you, depended on you, and you betrayed that trust in the worst possible way." Davenport remained silent, his head bowed in shame. "But," Keanu continued, "I didn't come here just to condemn you. I came here to give you a chance to make things right." Davenport looked up, confusion and a glimmer of hope in his tear-stained eyes. "The dog survived," Keanu revealed. "I found him, got him medical treatment, and he's recovering. But he deserves justice, and so does your daughter." Keanu's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. Frank Davenport sat frozen, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, relief that the dog had survived, fear of the consequences he might face, and shame for his actions. What do you want me to do?" Davenport asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu's eyes narrowed, his jaw set with determination. "First, you're going to come with me to see the dog. You need to face the consequences of your actions head-on." Davenport nodded weakly, knowing he had no choice but to comply. As they left the house and got into Keanu's car, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. The short drive to Keanu's temporary residence felt like an eternity for Davenport, each passing moment bringing him closer to confronting the living evidence of his cruelty. Upon arriving, Keanu led Davenport into the house. The moment they stepped inside, they were greeted by the soft whimpers of the recovering dog. Davenport's breath caught in his throat as he laid eyes on the animal he had so callously discarded. The dog, still bearing the visible signs of its ordeal, cowered at the sight of Davenport. Its reaction was a stark reminder of the trauma it had endured. Keanu knelt beside the dog, gently stroking its fur to calm it. "This is what you did," Keanu said, his voice low and intense. "This is the pain and fear you caused." Davenport's legs gave way, and he sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the reality of his actions. Tears streamed down his face as he reached out a trembling hand towards the dog, only to have it shrink away in fear. "I'm so sorry," Davenport sobbed, the weight of his guilt crushing down on him. I didn't think." "No, you didn't think," Keanu interjected sharply. "You didn't think about the pain you were causing, about the life you were throwing away." As Davenport continued to weep, Keanu's expression softened slightly. He knew that true justice wasn't about revenge, but about restoration and preventing future harm. "Mr. Davenport," Keanu began, his tone firm but not unkind, "what you did was horrible, but you have a chance to make amends. Here's what's going to happen." Keanu outlined his plan. Davenport would confess his actions to his daughter, explaining the truth about what happened to her dog. He would then work with local animal shelters, volunteering his time to care for abandoned and abused animals. Additionally, he would make regular donations to animal welfare organizations, ensuring that other animals in need would receive the care his dog should have gotten. But that's not all, Keanu continued, his eyes locked on Davenport's. You're going to experience a fraction of what this dog went through. Davenport looked up, fear evident in his eyes. For the next week, you'll sleep outside in your backyard. No comfortable bed, no shelter beyond what you can make for yourself. You'll eat from a bowl on the ground, and you'll experience the vulnerability and discomfort this dog felt when you abandoned it. Davenport nodded, accepting his punishment without protest. He knew that compared to what he had done, this was a small price to pay. And one more thing, Keanu added, his voice softening. After you've completed this, and if the dog is willing, you'll have the chance to make things right with him, to earn his trust back, and maybe, in time, to reunite him with your daughter. Davenport's eyes widened at this unexpected opportunity for redemption. You'd allow that? He asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Keanu nodded solemnly. This isn't about punishment for punishment's sake. It's about learning, growing, and making amends. If you can prove that you've changed, that you understand the gravity of what you did, then yes, there's a chance for reconciliation. As the reality of Keanu's words sank in, Davenport's demeanor changed. The fear and shame in his eyes were replaced by a glimmer of determination and hope. He looked at the dog, then back at Keanu, and nodded resolutely. I'll do it, he said, his voice steadier than it had been all evening. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Keanu stood up, extending a hand to help Davenport to his feet. Then let's begin, he said. Over the next week, Keanu supervised Davenport's punishment, ensuring he adhered to the agreed-upon conditions. He watched as Davenport struggled with the discomfort and exposure, gaining a new appreciation for the hardships animals face when abandoned. During this time, Keanu also worked with the dog, slowly acclimating it to Davenport's presence. The process was slow and often challenging, but gradually, the dog's fear began to subside. As the week drew to a close, Keanu observed a profound change in Davenport. The man who had so callously thrown away a life was now humbled, his eyes open to the consequences of his actions. He had confessed to his daughter, faced her tears and anger, and committed himself to making amends. On the final day, Keanu brought the dog to Davenport's yard. With gentle encouragement, the dog cautiously approached Davenport, who remained still, allowing the animal to make the choice. As the dog sniffed his hand and then tentatively licked it, Davenport broke down in tears of remorse and gratitude. Keanu watched the scene unfold, a mix of emotions washing over him. He had set out to seek justice, to right a wrong, and in the process, he had facilitated a transformation. The road ahead would be long, with much work still to be done. But in this moment, he saw the first steps towards healing and redemption. As he prepared to leave, Keanu reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the moment he found the injured dog on the roadside to this day of tentative reconciliation, he had been driven by a deep sense of compassion and justice. He realized that true heroism wasn't just about grand gestures, but about the everyday choice to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. With a final look at Davenport and the dog, now cautiously bonding in the yard, Keanu turned to leave. He knew that his work here was done, but the impact of his actions would ripple outward, touching not just the lives of this man and this dog, but potentially inspiring others to act with kindness and courage in the face of cruelty. As he walked away, Keanu felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had sought justice, but in the end, he had found something more powerful, the potential for change, for growth, and for compassion to triumph over cruelty. And in that realization, Keanu found the true meaning of his journey. His unwavering commitment to nursing the dog back to health and confronting the perpetrator demonstrates that one person's actions can make a profound difference in the life of another, even if that life belongs to a four-legged friend. As we reflect on this touching story, let it serve as a reminder that we all have the capacity to be heroes in our everyday lives. Whether it's helping an animal in need, standing up against cruelty, or simply showing compassion to those around us, our actions can create ripples of positive change. May Keanu's example inspire us to be more aware of the suffering around us and to take action, no matter how small, to make the world a better place for all living beings. Thank you for watching. If you missed our last story, don't worry, I've got you covered. I'll leave it here for you to watch. Hope you enjoy it. A 12-year-old boy stumbles upon a watch lying on the pavement, its elegant design catching the last light of the setting sun. Selling it could change his world and lift his family out of their struggles forever. What he doesn't realize, however, is that this timepiece belongs to none other than one of Hollywood's most cherished actors, Keanu Reeves. What unfolds next will ignite a chain of events more extraordinary than he could have ever imagined. Before we dive deeper into this gripping tale, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow, another thrilling adventure awaits. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting golden streaks across the towering buildings of Los Angeles. Its light pooled on the sidewalks, elongating the shadows of street lamps and pedestrians. Keanu Reeves walked at an unhurried pace, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, his gaze distant. Though the city's hum pulsed around him, this quieter street seemed untouched by time, as if existing in its own realm. A neon sign blinked softly above an old cafe, alternating between warm blue and deep red, its glow reflecting on the wet asphalt. Keanu pushed open the glass door, and a small bell chimed. Inside, the wooden walls, round tables, and soft jazz playing from an old radio wrapped the space in nostalgia. He made his way to his usual corner and sank into the chair, the weight of unspoken thoughts settling on his shoulders. A waitress approached, a cloth draped over her shoulder. "The usual?" she asked with a knowing smile. He nodded, offering a small smile in return. Moments later, a steaming cup of coffee sat before him. He wrapped his fingers around the warmth, but before bringing it to his lips, his fingers instinctively brushed against the worn leather strap of his watch. The metal was scratched, the edges softened with time. Yet the dial still gleamed, a testament to its legacy. He tightened the strap, a subconscious habit, before shifting his gaze to the window. His reflection stared back, his thoughts clouded with distant memories. Taking a deep breath, he finally sipped the coffee, savoring its rich bitterness. After a few minutes, he placed a few bills on the table, stood up, and walked toward the door. The bell chimed again as he stepped into the crisp evening air. The lingering warmth of the day was fading, replaced by the cool touch of twilight. He strolled down the sidewalk, lost in thought, completely unaware that the clasp of his watch had loosened. With a slightly longer stride, the strap slipped from his wrist. The watch landed soundlessly on the pavement. Without a backward glance, Keanu continued walking, oblivious to what he had just left behind. On the other side of the city, the sky deepened into a velvety blue, the last streaks of sunlight fading beyond the horizon. In a modest, cluttered workshop, the air was thick with the scent of oil and metal. Daniel wiped his hands on an old rag, his small frame silhouetted against the dim glow of a hanging bulb. At just 12 years old, he was shorter than most boys his age, but what he lacked in height, he made up for in quick wit and sharp instincts. His father closed the toolbox with a tired sigh, rubbing his calloused hands. "Lock up when you're done, okay?" he said, his voice weary from a long day's labor. Daniel nodded. His father disappeared into the house, leaving the boy alone with the scattered spare parts, gears, and half-assembled engines. He loved this world, one where he could take things apart and piece them back together, understanding how they worked. But despite his fascination, he had never truly owned anything of his own. Stepping outside, he straddled his bicycle and pushed off, his legs pumping against the creaking pedals. The streets were slowly emptying, the flickering glow of streetlights casting long, wavering shadows across the asphalt. That's when he saw it. A small glimmer by the curb, a faint metallic flash under the dim light. Curiosity piqued, he skidded to a stop, his tires scraping against the pavement. He crouched down, his fingers brushing against the cool surface of a watch. But this wasn't just any watch. Lifting it carefully, he felt its weight in his palm. The worn leather strap, the gleaming stainless steel case. It was unlike anything he had ever held before. He turned it over, his heart beginning to pound. He had seen this model before. It couldn't be, could it? With trembling hands, he unzipped his backpack and pulled out his most treasured possession, an old magazine featuring the world's most iconic timepieces. The pages were dog-eared, some with pencil marks circling his favorite models. Frantically, he flipped through until his breath hitched. There it was, Rolex Daytona Paul Newman, a legend among collectors, renowned for its rarity and historic significance. His fingers traced the details, the white dial, black subdials, the striking red lettering above the 6 o'clock mark. His eyes flickered between the glossy magazine photo and the watch in his hand. It was an exact match. A wave of disbelief washed over him. The Paul Newman Daytona had been auctioned for millions before. Owning something like this was unfathomable. But then, his gaze fell upon the back of the watch, and his breath caught in his throat. An engraving. For Keanu, my love. Never forget who you are. His stomach twisted into knots. Keanu. The name was familiar, uncommon, but recognizable. He ran his thumb over the inscription, as if hoping it would reveal the story it carried. Whoever lost this watch wasn't just anyone, and right now, that person was likely searching desperately for it. Daniel stood there, gripping the watch tightly. The street was silent. There was no sign of its owner. His mind whirled. He knew exactly what he held in his hands, and now, he had a decision to make. As he rode slowly through the dimly lit streets, the watch nestled in his palm. He felt its weight in more ways than one. This wasn't just a lost item. It was an opportunity. Selling it could change everything. The thought consumed him. His father's workshop could finally thrive, no longer surviving on underpaid repair jobs. His mother wouldn't have to carefully count coins at the market, choosing between milk or bread. They could move into a bigger house, wear new clothes, never have to worry about money again. Never again would he have to see the exhaustion in his parents' eyes. He turned the watch over again, studying its craftsmanship, the smooth curve of the glass, the perfectly balanced dials. It wasn't just expensive, it was a golden ticket to a new life. And it was right there, in his hands. On impulse, he fastened the strap around his wrist. The fit was perfect. He imagined walking into his father's workshop, revealing the fortune they would soon have. The joy, the relief, the chance to start anew. His pulse quickened. Then, he felt the clasp press against his skin, and a voice echoed in his mind. What isn't yours doesn't belong to you. His father's words. Firm, unwavering. Daniel swallowed hard. His eyes drifted back to the engraving. For Keanu, my love. His chest tightened. This watch wasn't just valuable, it carried meaning. Someone out there cared deeply about it. And somehow, Daniel knew that person needed it back. He squeezed his eyes shut. The dilemma clawed at him. The promise of freedom from financial struggles versus the weight of doing what was right. What should he do? The choice would change everything. He took a deep breath and yanked the watch off his wrist as if it seared his skin. Daniel gripped the timepiece between his fingers, trying to comprehend the weight of his choice. Then, something subtle caught his eye on the inside of the leather strap. He frowned, tilting the watch under the dim street light. Etched in minuscule, almost imperceptible font was a phone number, an area code he didn't recognize. His heart pounded. If someone had gone through the trouble of engraving it there, this watch was more than just valuable. With slightly trembling hands, he pulled his phone from his pocket and carefully entered the numbers, one by one. His thumb hovered over the call button. Should he? He swallowed hard, took a steadying breath, and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Daniel felt a knot tighten in his throat. Then, the call connected. This is Rachel. Who's calling? The female voice was firm and alert. The watch suddenly felt heavier in his palm. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What had he just done? The phone continued to ring in his mind as the silence on the other end stretched. But Rachel spoke again, her voice unwavering. Hello? Daniel clenched his jaw and forced himself to respond. I found a watch. A second of silence passed, but it felt infinitely longer. What kind of watch? Her voice sharpened with interest. Daniel glanced at the object in his grasp. A Rolex Daytona Paul Newman. Leather strap. White dial with black subdials. There's an engraving on the back. Rachel went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted, tinged with something deeper. What does it say? He ran his fingers over the cool metal and read aloud, "For Keanu, my love, never forget who you are." On the other end of the line, Rachel let out a short breath, not just relief but something heavier, as if a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. "Where did you find it?" "Near a cafe. It was just lying there, in the middle of the street." Rachel was silent for a few moments, as though organizing her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice was more personal, more direct. "Daniel, that watch belongs to Keanu Reeves. He realized he lost it and has been extremely worried." A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. The name suddenly made sense. He had, of course, heard of Keanu Reeves, the movies, the interviews, but never in his wildest dreams did he imagine he'd be holding something that belonged to him. Rachel continued, her tone reassuring now. "I've been his personal assistant for years. When he noticed the watch was missing, we retraced his steps, searched the cafe, the entire street. But it was gone." Daniel looked at the Rolex again. The way she spoke made it clear. The watch was more than an accessory. It meant something. The silence stretched again. Finally, he took a deep breath and asked, "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Rachel let out a small chuckle, not in offense, but as if she respected the caution. "You're smart. That's good." There was faint movement in the background. "Listen, Keanu Reeves wants to meet you in person to thank you. He asked me to speak to you first to make sure everything is handled properly." Daniel frowned. "He wants to see me?" "Yes," Rachel confirmed, "but only if you're comfortable with it." His heart pounded. He never imagined a lost watch would lead him here. "Where?" Rachel's voice softened slightly. "There's a diner on Main Street that stays open late. Can we meet there?" Daniel took a deep breath, glanced around as if searching for an answer in the night. Then, he gave a small nod to himself. "Okay." Rachel paused for a moment before responding, her voice genuine. "Thank you, Daniel. Truly." He didn't answer, just ended the call. For a long moment, he stood still, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. Then, he carefully placed the watch in his backpack, hopped onto his bike, and pedaled toward what he knew would be a life-changing meeting. "Did you bring it?" Daniel glanced around before nodding. "Yes." Rachel noticed the hesitation in his eyes. "It's okay. Keanu's already inside. He just wants to thank you." Through the diner window, Daniel saw him. Keanu Reeves, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of him. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't in a hurry. He was just waiting. Daniel's pulse quickened. Rachel nudged him gently. "He's a good guy. Come on." Daniel inhaled deeply and stepped inside. The doorbell chimed as he entered. Keanu looked up and smiled. It wasn't polite or distant. It was warm, genuine. Rachel walked up to the table first. "Here he is." Keanu nodded, his gaze now fully on Daniel. "So, you found a watch?" His voice was calm. Daniel nodded in response. He swung his backpack off his shoulder, unzipped it carefully, and pulled out the Rolex. He placed it on the table. Keanu didn't grab it immediately. He just stared at it for a moment, fingers tracing its outline, as if reconnecting with something precious. Then, he turned it over, reading the engraving. He inhaled deeply, and for the first time, Daniel felt the real weight of what this watch meant. Then, Keanu smiled. "I thought I'd never see this again." Daniel swallowed. "I just found it on the street." Keanu finally picked up the watch and fastened it around his wrist. The fit was perfect. He looked at Daniel. "Thank you." This time, his eyes carried more than just gratitude. Keanu reached for an envelope on the table and held it out. "I want you to have this." Daniel hesitated before taking it. When he opened it, his breath caught. Inside was money. A lot of money. More than he had ever seen. His hands tightened around the envelope. "This is a lot." Keanu smiled knowingly. "I know." Daniel felt his chest constrict. This money could change his family's life. But something inside him made him hesitate. He glanced at Rachel, then at Keanu. I don't know if I can accept this." Keanu rested his elbows on the table, fingers intertwined. "Why not?" Daniel's mind whirled. Of course he wanted it. Of course he needed it. But something about simply taking the money and walking away didn't sit right with him. He took a breath and spoke the only truth he could muster. "I didn't do this for money." Keanu was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled again, just slightly, as if he already knew. "I know." And in that moment, Daniel realized this was just the beginning. He clutched the envelope, feeling its weight, knowing it wasn't just cash inside. It was a decision, a crossroad. He looked up at Keanu, who simply watched him, calm, patient, as if he already knew exactly what was running through Daniel's mind. "This could pay all my family's bills," Daniel murmured to himself. "It could," Keanu agreed, "but I don't want you to take it just because you need it." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Keanu took a slow sip of coffee before setting his cup down. "You thought about selling the watch, didn't you?" A chill ran down Daniel's spine. The air in the diner suddenly grew heavier. Daniel wanted to deny it, but the truth weighed on him. Lowering his gaze to the envelope, he answered quietly, "Yes." Keanu didn't seem surprised. He simply nodded, as if that was the answer he had expected all along. "And why didn't you?" Daniel blinked a few times. The reason should have been obvious. He had done the right thing, but deep down, he knew that wasn't the real reason. Taking a deep breath, he admitted, "Because I knew someone would miss it." A small smile crossed Keanu's face. "That's rare." Daniel looked at the envelope again. A part of him wanted to accept it, needed to accept it, but another part resisted, whispering that this wasn't right. He bit his lip. I don't know if I can take this." Keanu leaned forward slightly. "Then don't." Daniel frowned. "But you want me to have it." Keanu gave him a knowing smile but said nothing. Less than 10 minutes later, a car pulled up outside the diner. A man in a suit stepped inside, greeted Keanu, and handed him a different envelope. Without hesitation, Keanu opened it and slid a document across the table toward Daniel. "If you want, you can start tomorrow." Daniel hesitated, then carefully picked up the paper. His eyes widened as he read the words: "Internship at the Los Angeles Institute of Engineering and Watchmaking. Training for young talents. Scholarship for the future." His heart pounded. He looked up at Keanu, incredulous. This is real?" Keanu chuckled. "You reminded me of something important today, that good deeds should be rewarded. But not with money. With opportunity." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He never imagined that finding a watch on the street would lead to this moment, a chance to change everything. Keanu must have noticed the emotions playing across his face because he leaned in and said, "This isn't charity, Daniel. It's an investment." Daniel clutched the paper in his hands. For the first time, he felt something greater than money, a future. Keanu smiled. "So, what do you say?" The next morning, Daniel woke up to an unusual sound, the steady hum of a strong engine outside his window. Still groggy, he got out of bed and peeked outside. A sleek black SUV was parked in front of his house. His father, still in his pajamas, stood at the door, scratching his head as he eyed the vehicle. Daniel's stomach twisted. This was really happening. Before he could come up with an excuse, the driver stepped out of the car and approached the house. "Good morning. Is Daniel here?" His father turned to look at him, one eyebrow raised. "Kid, is there something you need to tell me?" Daniel swallowed hard. He hadn't told his father anything yet. The driver opened the car door and gave him an expectant look. "Are you ready?" Taking a deep breath, Daniel looked at his father, then at the car. This wasn't a dream. He nodded. "Yes." The ride was silent at first. Daniel gazed out the window, watching the city blur past. He still didn't know exactly what to expect. The driver took unfamiliar roads, leading him to a part of the city he had never seen before. Towering buildings, sleek, futuristic architecture, a world that felt completely separate from his own. When the car finally stopped, Daniel spotted Keanu waiting outside the entrance of a glass panel building. He stepped out of the vehicle, trying to absorb everything around him. Keanu smiled. "Welcome to the future." Daniel turned his gaze to the building behind him. Above the entrance, a large sign read, "Los Angeles Institute of Engineering and Watchmaking." His heart pounded. What is this place? Keanu tucked his hands into his pockets. A lab where some of the brightest minds refine the art of watchmaking. He pushed open the glass door and motioned for Daniel to follow. "If you want, you can start today." Daniel stepped inside, his eyes widening as he took in the space. Glass-walled rooms lined the hallways. Workbenches were filled with tiny, intricate tools. Engineers peered through magnifying glasses, working on parts so small they seemed invisible to the naked eye. He was mesmerized. Keanu led him to a workstation where a technician was carefully adjusting the inner mechanics of a watch. Every movement was precise, calculated, almost hypnotic. "You like taking things apart," Keanu said, watching Daniel's reaction. "But have you ever thought about creating?" Daniel didn't answer, because at that moment, he realized he had. This was a world he wanted to explore. Keanu must have seen the light in his eyes because he smiled. "If you want, you can start learning today." Daniel looked down at his own hands. He had always fixed old, broken things. But now, he had the chance to build something that would last. His eyes lit up. "I want to." Keanu nodded, satisfied. "Then let's begin." Daniel never again had to wonder, what if I had taken the money instead? The answer was all around him. In his father's thriving workshop, in the peace that had settled over his home, in the passion he had discovered in himself. That night, as he looked around at the people he had once thought were worlds apart from him, he realized something. A single act of honesty had changed everything. And sometimes, the right choice isn't about what you give up, it's about what you gain. If you found a lost watch, what would you do? If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.
In case you did not watch Keanu Inspirational Last Story, I will leave you with it now. Wish you enjoy it.